I am now.
Hi, I'm Carrie Vanston, and you are at the ACG's Association of Corporate Growth's Corporate Executive Austin San Antonio Roundtable. And we have these each month for corporate executives and business owners who are involved with leading growth-oriented companies so that they have a place of their own to gather and talk about challenges and issues and opportunities. We meet twice a month, one for the roundtable on the first week, Tuesday, and then a mastermind on the third week. And this is all possible because of our chapter sponsors. So we would really like to thank Weaver, Dykema, Insperity, and Higher Better, because if it wasn't for them, we would not be doing this. So thank you very much. Today, we have our roundtable. We have Gary Hoover. He's the Executive Director of the American Business Center. He's also the CEO and founder of many other companies. I'll do some more introducing on him later. Today, he's going to be talking about the 10 myths about profit. This is going to be recorded, and please put your contact information in the chat box. The members of ACG will get a list of attendees with all their information, but the non-members, we always put our information inside the chat so you can still be in contact with each other. Our next CEASAR Roundtable is Tuesday, May 4th. Be sure to save the date. I think I have Matthias Ivanfeld coming. He is the CEO of Woom Bikes. We're still talking to confirm that date, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be speaking. Yay, so he'll be really interesting. And then in June, I'm talking to the women leaders over at SKU. And a couple of our members, Andy and John, are involved with that group, and they're just really very entrepreneurial. And Michelle and Kirsten will hopefully be speaking in June. So save those dates, first Tuesday of the month. And then we have our mastermind on the third week, and that will be April 20th. And that's a smaller group of people, and we each have about 10 minutes to just talk about the issues and the challenges and opportunities that are going on, and we all share during that period. So I hope you come to that. If you haven't come before, it's really a valuable way to really connect with each other. And today we'll have a lightning round introductions. Everybody will have a couple of minutes to kind of just share who they are. Then Gary will be giving a short presentation, and then we'll have just kind of a discussion and ask him questions and talk around that. And the session will be recorded. And next, we are going to have Susan Vaughn tell us all about the benefits of ACG.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm eager to do that today because I'm really excited. We've had some great programming. We continue to have great programming. We had a wonderful event with Liz Hawker recently. I don't know how many of you were able to attend that, but it was just outstanding and so informational, and she was a really engaging speaker. So if you've not signed up, showed up, and enjoyed these talks that we've been able to gather for, I really think you're missing out, and I hope that you'll check out the ones in the future. Of course, it's always on our calendar, ACG, ASA.org. So check it out there, but I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we've got going on for April. Thursday, we've got SPACs. Does everybody know what a SPAC is? Special Purchase Acquisition, somebody help me. Fund?
Company.
Thank you.
I think.
You did good. You did good. Thank you. But we're going to talk about not only SPACs, IPOs, and the resulting cultural changes. And so this is the collaborative event with ACG Silicon Valley and Silicon Hills. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, Silicon Valley and San Francisco.
San Francisco. Thank you. Okay, so that one should be really exciting. That's on Thursday. And then on 4/22, drum roll please, we are doing an in-person happy hour for members only. So if you're not a member and you're itching to get out and see live people, please consider joining. This is going to be one of the ongoing member benefits, aside from all the others that have been around forever, like tapping into the national ACG membership through the directory with all that direct connectivity, if I can speak today. And, you know, there's just so much network capability, and it's only been expanded through being able to go virtual with other chapters and so forth. So lots and lots of member benefits, not the least of which is getting to meet with wonderful people like yourselves. So thank you for all. Oh, you know what? I'm forgetting one more thing. For the women in the room, we've got a women's event coming up on 4/29. It's a multi-chapter event, and it's going to be on something fun: wine purchasing, taste, and trends. So I'm excited about that one. I think Carrie and Sarah might be too, and Christine, hope you're on board as well. Share that with your women friends and colleagues, please. But I'll hand it back to Carrie now. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Oh, look, there's Brad. Great. So now we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. And my name is Carrie Vanston. I am the Alligator Wrangler. I help executives and business owners and entrepreneurs who are kind of stuck in the alligator pit of uncertainty and frustration. I help them increase their energy and leadership mindset and skills so that they can create more abundant, successful life. And how about Andy? Would you like to start next?
Sure, I'll start. Hi, this is Andy Fogarassi. I'm the CEO of Austin Beta, a small consulting company that I've had for many years. I do interim COO and CFO services for startup and growth companies, putting in the infrastructure and the pieces to help them get going or get to the next level. And it's been a good year so far, working with some different companies, and I'm looking forward to coming out of the coronavirus time and really seeing what happens.
Great, thank you, Andy. How about you, Charu?
Let me get unmute myself. Hey guys, how are you? My name is Charu Pell, founder of the two companies. One is InnoSec, which is innovative security. We practice, basically, we transform cybersecurity and simplify compliance. That's a tagline which we have, and really we feel that security and compliance is being made very complex, and we have really did a deep dive in that area to work with the clients and help them save money too in the process. And our new venture is Security, which is an e-learning corporation. We started as a, long story short, to support our security corporation, but then now it has become its own independent company to teach people on the learning side of e-learning side of security and compliance. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Charu. How about you, John?
Hey, good afternoon. It's John Spencer. My company is Clear Direction, and we provide outsourced and fractional vice president of sales services, and not a consulting firm, but actually coming in and doing the vice president of sales work for your organization, taking that off of you, and with an experienced mindset, giving you as much as you need, assessment all the way through execution, hiring, whatever you need. And we do that contract by contract. So very excited to be here. It's a great topic. Really excited about both the vaccine thing being over with and be able to get back out, and then hearing from Gary today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. How about you, Christine?
Hey, everybody. I'm Christine Bryant, the founder and CEO of Gladiator Consulting. We do business planning and fractional CMO work for B2B companies and also startups. We help them define go-to-market strategies and identify messaging and visual communication that will help them with growth.
Great. Thank you, Christine. How about you, Jonathan?
Hi, I'm John Trimble. I'm the founder of Bond, which is a new company that I founded last year, focusing on cybersecurity strategy and solutions, really focusing on companies that are trying to protect sensitive information, such as law firms, CPA firms, investment organizations. So kind of a niche market that we're looking at, not just introducing technology solutions, but also workforce training and processes.
You work for did you say was it the FBI for many years?
Yeah, so I retired from the FBI last year. I was their Chief Technology Officer for the Information Management Division.
Great, great background. Very, very interesting. Welcome,
Thank you.
Jonathan. I'm so glad you came today.
Glad to be here.
And let's see, Bill, are you around there? He's dark. Okay, so let's go to David.
First, push the right button. Good afternoon. Hi, Gary. I saw you once years ago. It's nice to see you again. I am on my third career of sorts. My first was a corporate international banking, and then for a number of years, I was a corporate treasurer and a CFO at a company here in town called Temple Inland before they got bought, and they didn't need two of what I was. I also was the CFO for their national scope real estate development company and ran a couple little turnarounds that my chairman said, shut up and do this. So I did. When that all finished, I started up a little consulting business, Peleus Group LLC. My partners turned out to be flawed. I lost them and I gained a restaurant business kind of on the fly. So I'm now officially a restaurateur and a consultant, and I help companies who know their business but don't know business generically, and they're a little afraid or simply incapable of broadening, stepping up, making themselves bigger or redirected anyway because they are only used to what they do. And that's not an easy sell, but it comes pretty well with referrals.
What's the name of your restaurant?
Manja Pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Been around 31 and a half years now. I got it out of bankruptcy with the partners a number of years back, but I did not found it. The guy who founded it got dreams of glory and overexpansion and the wrong partners. It's a classic, what were you thinking story looking backwards.
Not uncommon in the restaurant business.
Oh, not at all. He was a good cook and thought he could be all the other things that are needed to be in that business.
Susan?
Hi, everyone. Great to see you again today. Susan Vaughn. I'm with Insperity, and Insperity, if you're not aware, is a national outsourced HR partner for small to mid-sized businesses. And so we help companies to optimize their people. We have HR technology. We have employee benefits. We help companies with compliance because they generally don't know what they don't know on that front, right? And then culture strategy. That is certainly not the least of what we do. So we work with clients from 5 employees up to 5,000 employees, and we are extremely busy right now. COVID's presented, a lot of challenges for leaders and for navigating all kinds of new territory, if you will, in HR space. So,
what was the original name of Insperity? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, good for you. Administaff.
Yeah.
Administaff.
Big
Still
outfit.
the same leadership. It's a great story. But yeah, still the same leadership. Thanks for asking.
Susan is also our president-elect at Association of Corporate Growth. So that's very cool. And she's actually the one that brought me in about, 2.5 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And about 6 months later, I became the ambassador of ambassador's officer. And I said, well, I need someone to help me introduce people and be the communication ambassador person. And so Susan became one of my members. The next thing I knew, they asked her to be the membership officer. So she became the membership officer. And then she became what did you come first? The vice president. And then she became the president-elect. So next year she'll be our president. So we have had a lot of fun together, going to events and kind of being each other's right-hand woman.
I agree, Carrie. We're partners in crime and in good work, right?
Yes, exactly. How about you, Brad? Are you on? We don't see your face. So.
I am correct. Yeah, I'm in the middle of 3 things. Hi there. Brad Heath, CEO and founder of Vertex. To align the what we do more with everybody else, we're a fractional manufacturing company. So we do manufacturing for other folks. We do design development, product development, mostly in the aerospace, defense, and government. But we also do industrial, high-rel industrial, automotive, and a little bit of medical, just to balance out the mix.
Very cool. How about you, Edwin? Great to see you.
Thank you, Kerry. My name is Edwin De Angel. I am the CEO and founder of Invention Matters. Invention Matters is focused in the intersection of technology and intellectual property. We help law firms and technology companies positioning the intellectual property portfolio. We work on licensing, monetizing portfolios, but we also help asserting patents and doing analysis for patent infringement and getting business intelligence from their patent portfolios.
Fantastic, thank you. How about you, Sarah?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Singer, the chapter executive for ACG Austin San Antonio. I know that Susan ran down some of the benefits of being a member of our chapter, and I wanted to just thank you all who are members and let anybody know who is interested in membership to just put your name in the chat box or send me an email, and I'll be happy to relay some information regarding membership to you.
Great, thank you. If it wasn't for Sarah, we probably wouldn't be able to do this because she's a huge help. She's a huge back end help. Bill, are you still there? Okay, well, you can, well, Gary already knows you, but Jonathan knows you anyway, so. But I'd like to now introduce Gary. Gary is just like an icon in Austin and the world. When I was directing the Mini-Trends conference back in 2013, 14, 15, he was my keynote speaker. I think it was 2014. And I was so excited to have him at the time because he just has done so many amazing things. Right now he is the executive director of the American Business History Center because he really has a passion for the history of business. And that is a nonprofit and really dear to his heart. And actually, Bill Leak is one of the board members. So he is real supportive of Gary in that. But anyway, he created a BOOKSTOP, the leading edge book superstore that helped revolutionize the future of book shopping in America. And after just 7 years, he and his partner sold it to Barnes & Noble for $41.5 million cash. And then it became a cornerstone of the industry dominating store chain. And then after that, he created the Hoovers, the world's largest internet-based provider of information about enterprises. He went public on that, and in 2003, the company was purchased by Dun & Bradstreet for $117 million. Since then, in 2019, he launched hooversworld.com. He's also the founder and CEO of the Spark Factory. He's the founder and CEO of the Big Wig Games. He's always got great things going on. And then in 2019, he also served as the first entrepreneur in residence at the Herb Color Center for Entrepreneurship at McComb School of Business. And he also has Hoover's Academy, where he teaches many people how to be more entrepreneurial. He's a published author. He's a renowned lecturer. He's just an amazing person, and we are so lucky to have him today. So welcome, Gary.
Well, thanks, Carrie. That's a mouthful. It makes my head hurt thinking about all those things that I've done. Let me see, before I forget, it's so cool to meet all you people, and some of you I've met before, but before I forget, so Brad, I advise a small defense inventing company in my hometown of Anderson, Indiana. So maybe shoot me an email afterwards. I don't know if they need any manufacturing, but you never know. They mainly invent stuff. They've been working with the Pentagon for years and years, an old buddy of mine from my hometown. And then John mentioning the FBI. So my older sister was the secretary to the head of the FBI labs, and then transferred to be the secretary to the, or I guess administrative assistant, to the head of Quantico. And then she married the greenskeeper at Quantico and retired to raise horses and dogs. This was back in the 70s. So I heard a lot of FBI stories. I got a personal tour of the lab when I was, 18 years old or something. So connection there. Let me see, before I forget on my background, it gets left out, but after BOOKSTOP and after BOOKSTOP and Hoover's, which actually started out as the Reference Press, it was later renamed Hoover's, I did Travel Fest. So, and if you are travelers and lived in Austin in the 90s, we had travel superstores that were also revolutionary, equally revolutionary, if not more so, in the travel industry. Won all these awards, did 3 times our projected revenue, but the airlines decided that they didn't want to pay commissions to travel agents anymore. And I borrowed over $1 million personally to try to save it. It didn't work. So those nice big figures of the 40 million from BOOKSTOP and the 117 or whatever from Hoover's. When Hoover sold, I got $60,000 and I owed all of it to other people. So I lost all that money and I live on Social Security now. So the life of an entrepreneur, you know, the whole cycle. And the other general thing I'd like to say is I really love the fact your organization is about companies that want to grow, the growth oriented and growth focused. We're going to talk about myths today. One of the big myths that's out there, in my not so humble opinion, is this thing that small businesses create all the jobs in America, and in a sense, kind of the underlying implication is big businesses don't matter or matter less. And we're also in an environment where people are really down on big companies. That comes in waves. It was really big in the 1930s. It's back with this again. There was a fair amount of it in the 1960s, but everybody loves small business. And the reality is, if you look at job creation, yes, both big and small businesses create tremendous numbers of jobs and destroy tremendous numbers of jobs. And all that press is just about the marginal difference. So I forget the numbers. I have a video up on YouTube. I've got hundreds of different lessons and things on YouTube. But a video about job creation, I forget the numbers, but it's like, okay, big business creates 80 million jobs and destroys 79 million, and small business creates 70 million and destroys 65 or whatever. So anyway, you come up with, oh, big business only created 1 million and small business created 5 or whatever. And that's what gets the headlines, but it shouldn't be. What should get the headlines is the 80 million and the 75 million, the job creation, because it isn't about small business or big business. There have been these academics who seem to get lost in the weeds a lot. They do all these studies. So, well, no, it's older businesses or it's newer businesses. And they try to look at, you know, the age of the business, the size of the business, different variables. But the real variable is it a growth-oriented company? Is it committed to growth? Is it in the right industry and position? Because let's face it, the Targets of the world, the Dollar Generals of the world, the Costco's, the Apples, the Teslas of the world are big Amazon, big companies that create tremendous numbers of jobs and are just very, very important to us. And those outfits offset the General Motors and the Sears and the dying companies or the troubled companies that have lost all those jobs. My hometown, Anderson, Indiana. When I was a kid, 27,000 General Motors workers in a town of 60,000. Today, there are 0 General Motors workers in Anderson, Indiana. So there's your job destruction for many reasons. I could give a whole talk about the decline of General Motors and their whole history. And so it got me interested in studying business as a kid. Nobody in school could answer my questions about General Motors. They teach us about leadership, management, governors, kings, queens, generals, strategies, who won the Civil War and who lost and why, and leadership styles. And I thought it was fascinating. Nobody could answer my questions. What about General Motors? It's the big deal here. And so I started subscribing to Fortune magazine at 12 years old when I discovered the Fortune 500, and General Motors was the biggest, really the greatest company on earth at that point, no longer. So, you know, the idea that it's about growing. There's another, I think, myth, at least that's my judgment, very difficult to prove. There's all this stuff going around about how America's less entrepreneurial than it used to be. There have been a lot of studies done, big studies done by the Kauffman Foundation, which is a great entrepreneurship, you know, think tank research center out of Kansas City, wonderful thing. But they've compiled this data and they show there's a lot fewer business formations than there were in the 50s and 60s. And it's been on a downswing. And yet, having spoken at, well, I've been to 45 countries and hundreds of universities all over the world and business groups and everything, but the entrepreneurial energy worldwide and I really apologize. I can't can't give you a good answer why that happened. Anyway, let me just finish that thought. The thing is, this business creation thing, my best guess is what's going on is they're looking at incorporations, because that's the data you can get from the government, how many entities were created. But the reality is that in corporations, you've got all your partnership deals, you know, your oil and gas deals, you have real estate partnerships. You have a lot of entities that have been created over the years that aren't real businesses, or, you know, don't have employees. They're real entities. I remember it used to be, because of the way the tax structure worked, the great Tom McCann shoe store chain had maybe 1,000 stores. Each store was a separate corporation, because on your first 100,000 of profits or whatever, you were taxed at a lower rate. And the IRS changed that and they merged them all, and it was one corporation. So there you got 999 fewer corporations or whatever. Haven't really figured it out, but there's no question entrepreneurial energy is greater than it's ever been. And maybe there were a lot of small businesses, small restaurants and shops started. There always have been, and always a high failure rate. But there weren't businesses that were created to get big. I mean, you don't have to be nuts like, oh, I got to be a unicorn. But, you know, hey, I want to get to 5 million in sales or 10 million or whatever. Let's see. Well, the topic that was down was the 10 myths about profitability. I went back through that. Hopefully you've all seen the link, or you can go to Hoover's World and find it. It's a pretty long thing, and it would probably fill up our remaining time for me to go through all 10. But so let me just hit on a couple of the key ideas. The real big idea is that there's this debate about profit maximization being the goal of every business, and that's what counts, you know, and that's what everybody should pursue. And that really, it got some emphasis from my old economics teacher, Milton Friedman, who was concerned about the social responsibility movement, and come back to why he felt that way. I think he had some valid reasons. But then, and a lot of it, how do I say it nicely? Having been working at McCombs Business School and still teaching, they use my entrepreneurship book in classes there, and at a lot of business schools around the country. I lay a lot of the fault at the foot of the business schools. You've got, these are my friends and everything. They're great people. They're really smart. They love to study and think and read. But so few of those professors have ever run a business or met a payroll and really understand the full dynamics. And I would go so far as to say, even, I mean, 4 of my teachers in college later won Nobel Prizes in economics, but I would go so far as to say very few of them could have run a business. It's just a whole different mindset. Certainly a startup or taking those kind of risks, because in the academic community, you have people whose goal in life is to get lifetime employment, you know, to reach tenure, and they'll move all over the country, college to college to college, just to get tenure. And I think sometimes they have this perception that the rest of the world is out there scared to death every morning that, oh, I'm not going to have a job tomorrow. When in fact, if you go to a well-run company, a Target or a UPS or Procter & Gamble, almost nobody, unless they're a real screw up, is worried about, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And the real winners, successful people, driven people, are pretty confident they'll have a job in 5 years or 10 years, you know, you're with a decent company. But the only, okay, take the phrase, the purpose of business to make a profit. That's like saying that the purpose of each of you or me is to carry around our heart and our brain and our lungs and our liver and all that jazz, you know? I mean, without them, we're done with. We are not of much use to anybody. But to be a container for organs is not why the good Lord, or whoever you want to choose, put us on this earth, you know? Each of us has a purpose, or at least those people who are fortunate enough to find their purpose. I remember a great old saying that I fell in love with years ago, is there are 2 great days in your life. One is the day you're born, and the other day is the day you find out why. I think it took me into my 40s or 50s to really discover why I was put here on earth. But so the purpose is not to have a brain, you know, just to carry around your brain and your heart. At the same time, they're absolutely required, and profit is so critically important to every organization, every for-profit organization, every nonprofit organization. In the nonprofit world, which I've been very active in, before I lost all my money, I gave my old college enough to build a dormitory and all that. But they run from the word profit because it's a dark or evil word, you know. But the reality is they all have ancillary income. Earned income is a term they use in the museum industry, which I study deeply. If you spend more money than you take in, you're not going to survive. And you're not going to have any rainy day money for a recession or a pandemic. And you're not going to have any money for innovation. Peter Drucker said, profit is the future. That's the money that, I mean, we'd have no iPhone if the iPod hadn't been a home run, you know. Risk money, people taking chances on new ideas and developing new products. That all comes from profit. That comes from the money you have left over, you know, after you've covered payroll and rent and you know, broken even for the year and gotten above that level. So profit is just critically important, and I never want to lose sight of that. But it's not why an organization exists. The only valid reason for any organization to exist is to provide goods and services to people. And I don't care if it's a Catholic Church or the University of Texas or Microsoft or Tesla or BOOKSTOP or, you know, ACG results. I don't care, you know. And this whole stakeholder capitalism, as you may know, I was fortunate enough to be on the Whole Foods board of directors for like 4.5 years in the early days when they went public and everything. The second Whole Foods was next door to the first BOOKSTOP. So I go way back with the founding team there. But John Mackey has really led this conscious capitalism movement. And there's a sense that, oh, it's something new and revolutionary, and that's fine. But the reality is, if you go back through history, which is what I'm obsessed with, learning from the past, and I picked that because it's a niche, an unfilled niche. When one of you, may have been John, mentioned one of you pursues a niche, service, it was to lawyers and accountants. And the money is in the niches. It always has been, you know, and finding that right sweet spot. And the reality is, if you Google business history, it's a wasteland. Any other subject, you know, some rare breed of dogs or some country you've never heard of, how to travel there. There's a dozen or 1,000 websites on it. I mean, almost any subject. Google business history, there was nothing. So Bill Leak and a couple of other friends and I created the American Business History Center. We do a free weekly newsletter, which I urge you to subscribe to. My, though, in Hoover's world, I do much less often, 6 to 12 times a year, and that has more about current and future business and so on. But if you study business history, you find that the great leaders were always, in a sense, conscious capitalism. Now, you know, the technical details of tactics change over time. The way that employees have been treated has changed pretty dramatically over the last 100, 150 years. But if you really look at putting the customer first, because it all flows from the customer, there's nothing left for employees, for stockholders, for the community, for your suppliers, if you aren't taking care of your customers. And that's where I see big companies so often, you know, lose their way and go astray. So that's kind of the essence of those myths. There were some other things in there, you know, there's a lot of ruckus right now about Amazon and all these companies not paying taxes. Hey, all those tax codes were created by Congress, you know, and somebody put them in there for a reason, sometimes good reasons, sometimes not so good reasons, sometimes helping their friends. I remember, it's like if you buy a corporate jet, this may still be true, you can depreciate it like in the first year or something. You know, everything else you got to depreciate on your P&L over 10 years or 20 years or whatever, depending on the life of the asset. Well, all I could figure out, everybody was screaming about, oh, this is awful. This is a giveaway to big companies. I tried to figure out, well, why do we even have it? And it was very opaque, I guess would be the word today. You know, nobody was looking at it. No reporter or anybody was. And as far as I could tell, it looked to me like the Congress men and women, whatever, from Wichita, which is where the jets are made, wanted a break for their, you know, local companies, you know, which kind of screws everybody, because all it does is because sooner or later they'll get undone. And all it does is compresses all the next 10 years of demand for corporate jets into 1 or 2 years, or that kind of a thing. So So often we see unintended consequences, but all those things are on there for a reason. And I did some digging, but didn't get too far. But I'm guessing in Amazon's case, an awful lot of it is tax loss carry forwards, which is the simple idea that you don't know taxes on income until you've broken even. If you go out and start a business and invest $1 million or 100 million or $1 billion developing your drug or your software or your business. I mean, even a Home Depot, BOOKSTOP lost money for the first few years as we built the chain. Everybody did. Target lost in its early days. You know, those losses, you've got to earn that money back before you start paying taxes. And that's so that your first X million of profits, you don't pay taxes on. And I'm guessing that's a big part of the Amazon story. That whole tax structure makes sense to me. But man, it all gets blurred out there in the media, and politicians and everything gets football around. Those are just some general thoughts and comments. With such a good and interesting group and a small group, I would just as soon, you know, have a discussion or Q&A, or, you know, hey, whatever works for you guys. Now that I'm back on, and according to my little meter down there at the bottom, it looks like my Wi-Fi is surviving, and I don't have to give it a vaccine or anything.
Gary, Andy Fogarasi here. I've got a curious question for you, and I really appreciate your direction of discussion. I was doing some research not so long ago, and especially on the mission-driven company. And my research showed that prior to about the 1970s, that wasn't the case for any corporation. It wasn't until kind of Peter Drucker, as you mentioned earlier, brought up the concept of a purpose-driven, mission-driven company. And before then, a mission or a purpose was primarily a military concept or tactic. So this whole idea of being mission, vision, and values-driven and something more than profit really is a new concept in business. It's not something that was widespread prior to the 60s and 70s. Is that what you also have seen in your research? Is that consistent with what you've?
Yeah, no. I would love to see, Andy, you know, your research and what you found and the books. No, not at all. The Procter & Gamble founded in 1837. It was about making great soap, you know, and it took them a lot of work. My strongest case, and if you read the thing on the 10 myths, I talk at length about Robert Wood, and I wrote a biography of him. You can find it on the American Business History site. He was a guy that came into Sears Roebuck in the 1920s, and the man who basically owned Sears, Julius Rosenwald, the primary owner. First of all, Rosenwald was one of the first retail companies to go public. Goldman Sachs had the guts to take him public when most of the big public companies were railroads, and a few others like U.S. Steel and General Electric. But he went public, but part of his deal is he gave, I forget, 15 or 20% of the company to the employees. This is like 1920s. And they especially weighted the system towards the clerks. It was kind of biased away from the store managers. I mean, everybody got their share, but they went out of their way. And then Rosenwald, he really wanted to be a philanthropist. He built 5,000 schools for poor Black kids in the South with this money. He was just the most amazing man. And he wanted to become a philanthropist. He needed a new head for Sears Roebuck. Rosenwald was really a man who made it a great company, and it was all mail order. And this guy, Robert Wood, who was a demographics junkie like I am, the Statistical Abstract of the U.S., the big book that has all the data about the U.S., the legend is he read a table of that every night before he went to sleep. And he saw the changes in America. And Sears lived off farmers. And he said, no, they're moving to the cities, and we're not going to be able to succeed unless we go to the cities. And he said, I will only join you, Mr. Rosenwald, and help run Sears if you'll let me build bricks and mortar stores. And Rosenwald said, I don't know about that idea, but I really want you to come, you know, help run the company. And so, okay, you can give it a try. And within like 7 years, by 1930, over half of Sears sales were in stores, and the mail order was less than half. And then Wood basically ran it through the 1960s, early 60s, and his philosophies carried on, and the stockholders got really rich. The company, it became the greatest retailer on earth. And it's one of those companies where you can see the full arc of its history now that it's essentially dead, essentially. But the thing is, if you study Wood, and I have quotes from him, he said, look, you got to take care of your customers first, your employees second, your community third, and you don't worry about the stockholders. They come last, you know, because if you do those other things, they'll be taken care of. And in the quote I use, he doesn't mention suppliers, but he was legendary for taking care of his suppliers and making sure they all got rich. And the people had big long-term deals with Sears in his glory days. It was an amazing thing. They would finance him. They would help him invent new products. They would go out for the clothing manufacturers and buy wool and cotton on the market to make sure their suppliers got the best prices. It was conscious capitalism writ large, and it was the greatest, biggest retailer and most profitable retailer on earth for like 40, 50 years. And I'm sure if I go deeper, I could find other cases. If you look at the decline of General Motors, man, you go back to the 30s, they were obsessed with product quality. They sent out thousands every month surveys to everybody who bought a General Motors car. And I've got copies of them, and you had to check. Did you like the windshield? Well, how would you do a better windshield? Did you like the doors? What would you make them? How would you make them better? And these were all, you know, handwritten and then compiled at GM headquarters. And I can assure you they read them, or they wouldn't have bothered sending them out.
Well, that was
the
Alfred
relationship with
Sloan's.
labor gets more complex, you know, the rise of the unions and so on. My hometown was one of the biggest United Auto Workers locals in the nation. The strikes, I've lived through those and everything. So there are a lot of complexities, but no, I think the greatest companies have always understood that it takes a village, or whatever you want to say. But having said that, because I've debated with my friend John Mackey a little bit about, oh, is this all new, or is a revolution? But the reality is I don't care, you know, as long as it gets done. So claim it's new, claim it's old. I do think you can learn so much from studying the greats of the past. You can learn so much and get so much inspiration. Study George Eastman, who I claim is the greatest technology entrepreneur in American history, the man that created Kodak. His biography is on the business history site. Unbelievable, unbelievable. And what he did for his employees, unbelievable. The wealth they created in that city of Rochester, New York, had probably the highest market share, closest to a monopoly, of any company in U.S. history without government support. Because the only way to really have a true monopoly is for the government to say, we like you. We're going to make sure you stay a monopoly. Eastman Kodak did it with better products, and they had something like 70% of the U.S. and maybe even global market share in film, which is where they made their money all those years. But then later they invented the digital camera, but kind of blew it, and long story.
Gary, I have a question for you. So you addressed the profit and the discussion around that. What about the concept of growth? That growth is absolutely what people are chasing. Because I've run into that also. I just wondered if you've ever addressed that or thought about that. Is growth something to be the objective itself? In other words, I understand your concept about taking care of the customers and the people, but there seems to be an endless pursuit of growth for growth's sake.
Yeah, man, that's a tricky one. I am an absolute believer in growth. You know, when I started BOOKSTOP, I had no interest in opening one nice bookshop. I have lots of friends who are individual mom and pop bookstore owners, and I'm a book. Well, it may not come up. I live in a library of 57,000 books. That's the reason I have to use this behind me, because otherwise you'd see all these Amazon boxes and all that nonsense. But I have always been growth oriented.
I want to see that.
No, you don't. They might cave in on you, and then we'd really lose the Wi-Fi.
Oh, that would be exciting.
I live in a 6,600 square foot old commercial building, 34 rooms, and each room's a different subject, and you have to turn sideways to walk through here. But in any case, yeah, too many books. I love bookstores, big ones, small ones, chains, independents, used, new, online, in person. In person's the best, bookstores. And I think there's a role for everybody, grow or not to grow. The thing is, from my perspective, I think I could speak for John Mackey if I take that liberty. If you're doing something that's really great and people love it, then you kind of owe it to people to serve more people, to go to more cities. And that's the way I always viewed it. But the other thing is, all my friends that work for the independent bookstores, unless the owner died, there's no upside. There's no personal growth. They hit a ceiling. At BOOKSTOP, I could look any store clerk in the eye and say, look, if you're good at this and you love this, you can have a store, manage your own store and make a lot more money soon, in 2 years, 3 years. So a lot of it is for the people inside the organization. You know, Walmart has created something like 100 jobs a day, 365 days a year for over 50 years. New jobs, and jobs that don't matter your race, your age, your education, just your desire to succeed. I mean, they've given more opportunity to people with high school diplomas, people that could never get on a Tesla, than any other company. And I would guess have created more jobs that pay over 50 to 60,000 a year than any other company has created total jobs. Because people forget how many high-paid people there are at a company like Walmart when you've got a total of 2 million plus overall employees, all those store managers and so on. So I do believe in growth. The challenge is, even if you do believe in growth, what's the appropriate level and what's the appropriate rate? You know, it's natural for entrepreneurs to be impatient and want, you know, all this bullshit about unicorns. But, you know, going too fast, going too slow, man, that is tricky and that is hard. BOOKSTOP, we had 1 store the first year. The next year we doubled to 2. The next year we tripled to 6, and we doubled to 12. And then the inventory control system that I'd written the software for, but I'd passed it on to somebody else by then, collapsed. And we didn't open any new stores for like a year or so. You know, we had to put on the brakes and get our system back in order so we knew what we had and what we were selling. So, you know, man, it's tough. And most companies in that growth stage, you'll see them stumble and kind of learn as a what you call cookie cutter retailing, like the big restaurant chains or the retail chains. Once you get it figured out, I always said our first store was a test. The second, you're 2/3 of the way there. By the third store, you should have your model figured out. And then once you've got that standardized design or approach, and also approach, because a good retail chain is really a factory that creates new stores and then a separate operation that runs them. The same with a big mall developer. I've been involved in the shopping mall development business in my previous life. And so that whole process of how do you pick the new cities, how do you pick the sites within the city, how do you negotiate the leases, how do you order the inventory and time it right, how do you order the fixtures, how do you hire the local team, the staff, how do you move a strong manager or assistant manager from an old store to the new city and get the right people. That becomes, when you're, you know, Dollar General is opening 3 new stores a day, every day, 365 days a year. Last year, this year, more next year. OXXO, the great Latin American convenience store chain, OXXO, they're also opening about 3 stores a day, about 1,000 a year. Radio Shack in its glory days, it knew how to crank them out, man. Those 18-wheelers would back up to an empty store shell, and out would come the carpet, out would come the pegboard for the walls, out would come the merchandise, all organized inside that 18-wheeler. The last thing out was a cash register. And in like 24 hours, they could go from being an empty store shell to being open for business. Because Charles Tandy was a brilliant, one of the greatest merchants who ever lived. The man who built Radio Shack. So that's a long answer. I believe in growth, but man, when to accelerate, when to slow, how to balance all the issues. Every time BOOKSTOP we expanded rapidly, I can't tell you, the store people come to me saying, why are we building more stores and we don't have it perfect yet? Well, I would come back and say, we may not be perfect, but the average American bookstore does 500,000 a year and our average store does 3 million. We are doing pretty darn good, you know, and our business is up 20 to 30%, even in our 4 or 5 year old stores. So we are way better than anybody else in the industry. And so I think it's okay to keep building stores, but yes, we aren't perfect. So let's sit down and talk about how we can get closer to perfect. But man, that's tricky.
Gary?
I do have a question from David and then Edwin.
Okay.
Gary, I'll preface this with 2 short vignettes, I hope. One, a few years ago, I went to a presentation, I'm drawing a blank, the couple that founded Amy's Ice Cream.
Oh, yeah.
And they would hire all these wonderful young people who had no clue how businesses made money. They thought if it came in the front door, that was all to the bottom line. And they go back, I had the good fortune to go to business school, to London Business School. A wonderful place with 20 nationalities, and virtually all the first line professors had been executives. I got a lot of transferred there into the nails and I learned a humongous amount, and I still use things I learned there. But at the time I was in England, it was the transition from the labor rights to Thatcher. And this whole social capital business isn't about profit, it's about serving social needs, what is not new. It was running rampant at that time. And the connection I see between the Amy's ice cream employees and what I saw in England and all the people I would talk to, and maybe even people from other countries, was that people had zero education of how enterprise actually worked, how it walked in. It was just there. And of course, somebody made money and they didn't have any idea. So they wanted to abscond with someone else's capital for their own purposes because they didn't understand the value of the capital somebody put in them. And that, as a public policy issue, any recommendations on how to actually explain things to people who are woefully ignorant?
Yeah, and I have to tune in there. So we started giving stock options throughout BOOKSTOP. I wanted to give them to every single employee. Charles Lazarus, who created Toys R Us, BOOKSTOP was really modeled after Toys R Us. And he gave stock options to every employee, I think even part-timers. And he would tell stories about how he had dock workers that had gotten 10 options, but they never cashed them in because of their pride in being part of the company. They put the certificate up on the wall and that sense of ownership. And so even though I was in Austin, surrounded by high-tech companies where everybody, oh, how many options am I going to get? It was the first question. Nobody at BOOKSTOP asked, how many options am I going to get? Maybe the CFO, maybe the tech person, maybe. But those people working in the stores, what the heck are stock options? So I went around to each store and I gave classes. Like, you know, after the stores closed at 11 o'clock at night or before they opened in the morning. And everybody employed, and I went through the P&L of the company and I showed them how much their store made, how much the company made, where the money went. You know, it was the early days, we were still losing money then. But, you know, that education is so important, and making sure everybody in the organization is wired into it. I remember Fred Smith, the greatest living active American entrepreneur, in my opinion. I wrote him up. Federal Express, the early days, he'd have an annual company picnic, outline the company's goals, short-term and long-term. He required all the families, all the spouses to be present at the picnic because he wanted total buy-in. When I look at the economic education thing, it's a disaster. And I've studied, I pulled up the economics textbooks that are required for econ classes in schools in Texas, high schools and all that. I've tried to look into it. I don't have much hope for the structured system, the formal system. So you've got outfits. There's a wonderful outfit called the Foundation for Economic Education. They publish some of my articles. They're working hard at it, getting out there. You have an organization called IZZIT, IZZIT.org. They distribute videos about capitalism and stuff to, I think, at one point they were well over half of all the high schools and junior high schools in America. They distribute also Free to Choose, the old Milton Friedman documentary that was on PBS, a big success. So it's really, I think, up to private organizations, and all, they're working at it. And the other thing I would say, though, too, that just sure comes through to me. So, hey, in the 1960s, I'm a University of Chicago student, and the SDS, and you're old enough to remember Students for Democratic Society, radical.
Right, so
they closed down the university the year before, seized the administration building, a big ruckus, to put it mildly. But those students got the university reopened, and they were back there when I got there in '69, and I would stay up all night arguing with my Marxist friends. And some of them are still friends, you know. And the one thing that I began to notice then, but it's become more apparent now, is, you know, oh, corporations are evil and awful, and capitalism, they're all a bunch of villains. And I'd say, well, what does your father do? And mother in some cases, but much more often back then father. Oh, well, he's the vice president at such and such company, or, you know. And I'm like, well, is he an ogre? You know. And people don't understand businesses are only human. No corporation makes a decision. People make decisions, good ones, bad ones. And that stupidity is far more common than evil intention. Study Enron, you know, the CEO dies in prison, you know, it wasn't, you know, and stupidity, he had a high IQ and he had a great MBA, but he wasn't really smart in the broad sense of the word. There's so many different kinds of smart and intelligence. I find over and over, and when I go to campuses and I talk to students, first of all, most students are apolitical. They're not, they're interested in getting high and getting laid or whatever, you know, but there are some that are political. But the thing is, their parents aren't talking to them. That is a huge deal. I remember meeting a young man, and he was all excited. His father was an economics teacher at UT, and he said, "Oh yeah," and he just won one of the awards. You know, they give national awards for best young teacher or researcher. And I said, "Well, wow, that's cool." I said, "So what's his specialty?" You know, everybody in academics has got a narrower and narrower in economics for sure. And so what's his area? You know, oh, you know, I don't know. I'll have to ask him. Hey, my dad sold glassware. He was a salesman and then marketing. He'd been in retailing, he had a grocery store, but the last 19 years of his career, there's no way I would have made it to dinner without knowing every piece of glassware they sold, every customer. Of course, I was asking questions too, but that man was just so thrilled to be bringing $1.99 dishes into people's homes through Kmart, and how much that would make those people's lives better, and how he had helped take his factory from having 100 workers to 1,000 or whatever with his, he completely rejiggered their whole sales force and took them up to be one of the largest makers in the country. You know, there's no way I could have gotten through life without knowing what his specialty was. And so you know, whether they're too busy, whether they don't know their kids, whether they work too hard and they don't get with their family, or whether they don't talk about business at home. So I lay a lot of the fault to business people in America.
You remind me of a quick story. I was on an airplane, a domestic flight in South Africa, and the lady next to me was 50-something, very proud of the work she was doing in an area called Cape Flats, which is a slum outside Cape Town, bringing young girls up. And so I said, well, what's the employment base here? What do these people have to look forward to? And she almost literally looked down her nose at me and says, "Oh, I don't concern myself with such crass things as commerce." And I kind of, there's a real disconnect here. The conversation stopped shortly after that.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely.
I want to get in Edwin's question. We do have a 1:15 stop. Did you say you had? Did you have a paper on the 10 myths of profit, Gary?
Yeah, go to Hoover's World. You have to scroll down because I wrote it a few months ago. But yes, the whole article is on hooversworld.com.
Can you send me a link for it and I'll send it to everybody?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, do that, and I'll send that to everybody. And then also, if you're willing, I'd love to have you back sometime. I think everybody's.
Oh, anytime, as long as the Wi-Fi's up, and I can go on longer if anybody wants to. I can always talk.
Where are you located right now?
Latonia, Texas. I moved here 4 years ago. Austin got too expensive for me.
Yeah, very cool. Okay.
Low cost of living, no traffic, and free parking. Come visit National Historic District, and I live right.
Yeah, we'll as soon as things open up, we'll all come and we'll.
Oh, you have to, unless you're a vegan, you can come have lunch at the livestock auction barn Monday, Thursday, or Friday.
Oh, okay. That's
real fresh beef.
Fun. That would be a really fun get together for all of us to come out there and get to hear about.
We're swinging. We have a movie theater that was closed for 50 years, just reopened. We got a new diner, entrepreneurs coming to town. I'm on the tourism board and the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Board. So no, we're 1,400 people. We're rocking and rolling.
Great. Fantastic, Gary. Okay, Edwin, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Gary, of course, if you have been here in Austin for a long time, you remember definitely BOOKSTOP. And what I wanted to ask you from living it firsthand is what went out good and what would you change looking back as lessons learned from looking at past history and how you live that one too?
Boy, you know, Edwin, that's a tough one. I mean, in terms of BOOKSTOP, I wouldn't change anything because I couldn't, getting that inventory control system working right. I would have loved skipping the bad year. I would have loved skipping the times when I had to call investors and have them Federal Express checks to cover payroll. Or I remember the time that our CFO drove to all the stores and took the cash out of the cash registers, because if they'd waited till the money was deposited overnight, the payroll checks would have bounced. You know, I don't miss any of that. But the way I always felt good about it was even if I had one of those awful days, on the way home from work, I'd stop at a store and wait on customers, because that always reminded me why I started the thing, was for book lovers like me and to make people happy and help them find books and publishers and authors they'd never heard of, because we carried thousands more titles than the big, what were then the dominant chains, B. Dalton and Walden Books. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I always say entrepreneurship is a lifelong journey of self-discovery. You know, I just turned 70 and there's still not a week goes by that I don't find that I'm not as good at something as I thought I was. And once in a while, something, well, I'm actually better at that than I thought I was. You know, you learn, you grow. Read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. You know, it's not, when people say to themselves, I'm really smart, that's a dead end. When they say I'm stupid, that's equal. I'm beautiful, I'm ugly. No, no. The people who make a difference, people have a growth mindset that believe that they're ever evolving and moving ahead, you know, and can learn. I mean, that's a basic fundamental thing of any successful entrepreneur, is their total self-confidence that they can master anything or find people who have those skills or can master them. Because you got people all afraid of all these different things. I mean, no, you can't be afraid of anything. You either go learn it yourself, get good at it. And when I started BOOKSTOP, I spent 7 years studying the industry before I went out and raised the money. I always spent at least a year trying to become the best expert. I teach a course, how to become an expert in any company or industry. People, that's one thing I found with MBAs, they're overall lousy at researching. Nobody teaches it. I'm involved at the Graduate School of Information at University of Texas, and that's where you go to learn how to research. All the heads of research at Austin Ventures were all graduates of that school, not the business school. The ones that really dug in and market sized and all that jazz. Wonderful. Some of the graduates, some of the women have a thing called bizology, Bizologie. And it's a consultancy that does research. So I'm an entrepreneur. Hey, if I got a little kid and they head towards the stove and you say, don't touch that, it's hot, and they don't touch it. No, it's the kid that has to touch the stove and burn their hand to find out. That's the future entrepreneur, you know.
Okay.
Not a very good answer, but that's the way it goes.
Well, thank you so much, Gary. That was wonderful. And yes, we'd love to have you back sometime. And everybody, thank you so much for coming. And Gary, that information. And we've got your, do we put your email on there?
You can always email me. It comes straight to me. I don't have any assistance or anything. It's GARYHOOV@msn.com. So my name without the ER at MSN, as in Microsoft Network. But go to hooversworld.com. You can always hit contact there. AmericanBusinessHistory.org. That's our main passion. I do free newsletters on both sites, but the business history thing is the big one. I have to finish an article today. We do one every week. Wonderful charts. The last 25 years of the most valuable, most profitable, biggest companies in America. Animated charts where you can watch the change. I just did one on the shifts of American retailing, what categories have fallen and risen over the last 30 years. But then long articles, the histories of companies, biographies of great leaders, just real diverse. We've published over 90 issues. Our website traffic is up about, right now, around about 10 times as big as it was a year ago. So we're really catching on. And that's an important thing for people to learn the lessons of the past.
Great, great. Thank you for all that info. I see Sarah has put your email in there and some other stuff. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for coming. And hopefully everybody will come on the 20th. And Gary, we would love to have you come to the mastermind if you happen to.
Send me an invite. I'll check my schedule.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Nice to see all of you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Everyone.